So I first started playing role-playing games, I think, in El Paso, like 2012, 2014. And, it was great. I wasn't really aware how ubiquitous the 3.5 system was, but I was in just shock and awe, really, with the amount of variability, the amount of choices. I quickly gravitated towards role playing the character is not so much of role playing the dice, because role playing the dice is something that I had done. I mean, in all sorts of video games, it's just you play to win. It's a game to win. But I quickly realized that there's all sorts of minor victories with the personality. I don't think I remember what my first character was. Oh yeah, it was Slip Jab. Yeah, Slip Jab. So he was a Skaven, and we were playing with these nerds, and it was a fun little group. And my Rat Man, you know what? Like I just the greatest moment over. He was addicted to Warpstone, and he had a traumatic experience resulting with the party fighting a Hydra. And so back then, I didn't realize how crucial it is to keep the party together. Everyone needs to be on board with this. There's really not a lot of variability here. I didn't know that. So the party went off on the quest, and I stayed back, which really, um, I don't recommend it to anyone, to DMs, to anyone. Um, and I tried to escape prison, and I died, or rather, Slipjab died, and um, my Warhammer years prepared me for it. And I went over, I reworked everything in my head over and over and over again, and then I realized that I had a set of armor on or something. And so it came out that I had 1 HP left. And with 1 HP, Slip Jab slinked away after getting stabbed and gutted by so many guards to go filter off into the sewers. And you know what? I think that was the last time we played. Um, my tenacity and kind of like tearing the steering wheel out of the DM's hands kind of like undid things. Um, and so the group fell apart after that. I did I DM'd not too long after that with some remnants of that group, as well as the beginnings of another group. And it went smoothly enough, I think. But eventually, I realized that the greatest thing about Dungeons and Dragons is the variability. You can make any sort of setting. It's there and it's possible. You don't have to break that many rules. You know, you don't have to break too many eggs to make the omelet. The omelet, everything's already there. Just turn on the stove. And we started. It was rather meek at the beginning. It was just me and two other friends, I think, role playing. We were using Black Crusade, which was a very technical Warhammer RPG role playing system. It's so technical. The amount of rules that need to be referenced just to ensure the smoothness of things. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I memorized pages and pages of Warhammer books with probably giving myself a lot of benefit, like at least 70 to 80% just absolute unwearing accuracy. Okay, and that's enough to make a game, because if you have 80% and the other guy has 80% or 80, 20, 30, whatever, there's enough there to understand most of the game. There's a good overlap. But we could not wrap our minds around the rules here. And just something that really came off immediately was playing. It's a chaos campaign in Warhammer, so you're essentially playing as evil. And so what happens when you get a bunch of evil characters together? they butt heads. And I was just immediately sort of I got messed up because the other guy's character was so much better at dealing damage than mine was. So I learned, and that was just with one DM and two players, and so I learned really quickly there that I would become an authoritarian sort of DM. I would always be more or less the say in these player interactions that turn sour, because they can turn sour, and civil war, it just the Civil War never really grows into anything prosperous. And so that there were years of this going back and forth, or no, yeah, we used this game system for a while. My buddy made a really structured sort of map, and I at the time though we were actually playing Warhammer, and me and him, like he was my main opponent or rival, or you know yeah, right, rival army. And so we had a grand campaign in Warhammer. Every year I'd come back for the summer for a month, and we would just play nonstop Warhammer, sweating or freezing or whatever it was in that stinking garage, just all the time. And so we eventually had what was more or less like a grand campaign arc in Gravius 3, which and we had multiple campaigns. There were 3 wars for Gravius 3, all right? And this campaign was just only the second one. But it really, I'll always remember it because that was when, my men did really well. Really well. I think I played really creatively. I didn't play too meta-like, and we stayed out of the meta, which made it really fun. But anyways, we kind of had this framework with how these campaigns went, and there was a translation. We kind of came up together this idea of an actual role playing, to take it from the point of the models. And so there was a lot of short stories and stuff drawn forth. And I had initiated two-player campaigns because it had been a struggle after 2014. After I left that place, it had been a struggle for me to find enough players. Maybe that reflects on me. And so there's this great, like, this growing urge, or rather this fear of my own incompetency, which I know the creativity was there, but being able to implement that in a digestible thing that could be, fun, making it work, and making it fun are two different things. I was almost making it work. And in my campaign, I experimented with a lot of really cool. I was reading H.P. Lovecraft, so I just plagiarized the shtick out of him, and so there was like a. I didn't want to say Cthulhu or get too directly, but there was one about some sleepy little town by the lake, and the water rolled in and it took everything back, and so I just kind of had that planned out. And it was kind of rewarding to know that there was this overarching thing. But I think the most incredible thing that happened in these like little campaigns is I would try to have these standalone areas. I didn't really get to have an overarching goal. It was kind of just like these little standalone things. And my favorite one was the Plasma Renaissance, where there's these Ogrins, and the warlord, he has like a plasma pistol or something, and so that's how he keeps everyone in check. And so that was eventually their quest, was just to give out the plasma guns to everyone else. Well, they did that, and that was it. And I sent them on their way, and they decided to come back. And it was the part 2. It was when they were reacting to everything they had set up earlier. It just became so rewarding. And yeah, and they even coined the term themselves, the Plasma Renaissance. And so that was pretty incredible. But during this time, I had a distinct lack of visuals rules. Like it was almost all spoken. It was very little that was actually like seen, and it was relying very heavily on just what I think I had one map. And I might have had some rudimentary grids for areas, this, that, but it was very abstract. I would pretty much just improv things. Like they would get to an area, and I would just make things up as it got there. And this campaign that I had done, I did it like 3 times. I finally got to a place, and there was just an incredible gaming community. I will tell you, if you're at Washington, Tacoma, those guys are fantastic. There's this place called Matrix Games, and is it the most charming store I've ever been in? Is it the cleanest store? Is it no, it's none of those things, but the people there are great. See, you got Warhammer fans, and you also have healthy Warhammer. There's people there that are actually healthy and play Warhammer, and they're not super duper competitive. I mean, at least that's and so you get people there for the story, and I was taken back just because I found these people, and before a Warhammer battle, they did something crazy. They had a backstory, little narrative as to why their armies might be fighting, and so suddenly, like, even though I was on the table next to them, I was like looking back and just like, because the context made it so much more interesting. I saw all these cultists of various different gods fighting against Skitarii, and we became a tight knit little circle because a Warhammer circle because we all kind of understood that the game was there for fun. Now, mind you, I got way too competitive and biased. I think I was probably the most toxic player in that group, and this is a reoccurring theme, and so it was great, and they finished the campaign. It felt like I did a really good job of being really descriptive. And so I was painting these really vivid pictures. But in that campaign, I think the set pieces mainly like were there for me. I don't know how receptive it was. We finished the whole thing, and there were a lot of smiles. But in the end, it was just another way for these people to enjoy Warhammer. I think that the Warhammer sold it. I was just continuing to sell it. And so those guys were great. And I ended up going back there to fight them again or to battle them. And that was cool. And so it moves on, and there's this place in town, and it's a Dungeons and Dragons themed place, and it's cool. You just show up to this spot, and you meet people, and they're already playing Dungeons and Dragons, so you can pretty much hop right in. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but I got there, and my friend, who was my friend, he'd come down from Antioch with his girlfriend. He was like, "Paul, the people here are so unhealthy," and that kind of grossed me out. But anyways, there was like a game, and yeah, things got pretty toxic. I think. I made a group, but like, I don't know. I just have a peeve. I have a peeve, and that is new players entering the group and deciding to fight. I mean, just initially, and so that happened, and that kind of, I think my toxicity sort of shut that down. It's just like it got to this point where like I hated the party. I didn't want to do anything with them, and instead of being a big boy and just leaving, they did an insight check and they realized that I wanted to sabotage them. But I probably just shouldn't have done that. So, I'm developing this trend of toxicity, but that was over the span of like 3 or 4 months. So I had a good run, I think, there going on. And so that guy could no longer host the games. I tried hosting again. One of my friends from earlier tried doing it. And so I tried to do this thing over the internet where I was using Skype. And so I brought my computer to the game store, and my friend and I were at the game store, and I had 2 other people Skyping with me. So I had the minimum amount of players, and it just didn't go over very well. I think that, like, I would try to, like, do this and, like, show people, like, this is the map, and this is where and it didn't translate very well. It didn't go over well. I knew, though, that I had to figure out females in the game, like how to implement them. Because there's this fat little tub of lard, just this butterball, and he was playing he described himself often, the tall blonde woman with large breasts, and I just think it's arbitrary, that here, listening to him, this nasty little man, gives him his impression of what the fairer sex sounds like. It was horrifying. If the fairer sex sounded like that, I would be readjusting my sexuality immediately. And so I realized that there are many things in Dungeons and Dragons and in this store that are just arbitrary, okay? And so there's gender, right? So how does being female change your gameplay? You could be pregnant, I guess, but do you want to play? I mean, there's a lot of options there. I'm not going to say there's not options for playing as a pregnant person. I think there's a lot maybe to be explored that I haven't thought about. But besides that, how else does it change? The stats don't change. There's no modifier for being male or female. Maybe if there was like a village of Amazonians, like, oh, that's going to matter. Maybe, I guess romancing things, but then again, there's life has many doors, Ed boy. So I'm coming up with, I guess, some instances, but they are the exception, I think, here. Very, very, very contextually oriented. And so, yes, I guess there's some situations where it comes into play, but in most of everything I've ever played, these things are not, it's not the case. And I'm sure you could play into that. But hearing this nasty little man try to sound like a woman made me see that it's for the most part, it doesn't really matter. I guess for the sake of just spreading things out, it's good to have some of these and that. But having a female NPC or PC, like, why? Just tell me really what the fundamental difference between male and female NPCs is. Now, maybe there's behavior differences, but I think everyone's kind of an individual, and that goes to players, characters, non-player characters, whatever. There's I don't know. I think it's arbitrary. And something else that is arbitrary, at least in the role play, the character kind of thing, I think, is race. I just saw so many people there playing these dumb races, just all these. I call them. Well, I'll tell you what I call them later because I took it out, but it's. A character is not nuanced by the demographics behind the character because whatever the tieflings, those things. There's so many tieflings out there. So, you being a tiefling, I get that you're playing a character. You're playing a tiefling. I get it, but how is this fundamentally changing your experience? How is this tiefling different than being a human? Just like, and I'm not saying that there's not a difference because there is. I believe there's a huge difference there. Okay, and so you need to show it. You need to I think role play along with your role playing because you're doing it. We know why you're doing it. You're doing it for all the buffs. And so I have this animosity towards these players that just play stats, I guess. And I get it. There's campaigns and there's settings for this, but I think there's a balance of both. Now, I'm definitely a little light on the actual rule side of the game. I definitely am, which is kind of um, ironic considering I'm a Warhammer player. But I don't consider this a game to play to win. I consider it. I mean, even a loss could be an experience, a novel experience. You know, there's the losers have wonderful stories to tell. Wonderful stories to tell. I mean, if really look at any war and just pick the losing side, and oftentimes it's something we don't often hear, and so just this drive to just become this, like, I guess, a bully, and that's really why I think that the role players do this is not only to win the game, but to be competitive against the other players. You know, I try a lot of malarkey, but but it's usually kept in check by the fact that my characters aren't usually that powerful. I don't, even if I do get a friend to help me like soup up my character, I'm not thinking about all the toolbox of abilities. I'm thinking about my trusty my trusty adjustable wrench, and that's pretty much it. And I don't know, but it's fun. But anyways, that shaped me a lot, and so it came to be that I ended up running into another group, and the DM, he was someone that I ran into through professional, so that was kind of weird. It started off. There was a program. Well, anyways, I'm going to their place, and I do not think that their home is a warm place. It's a clean place. They have wonderful cats, but there's just like the most dominating feature here are these two massive cages set on the side of this wall with these anxious Labradors that are sitting there whining whenever something moves too quick or gets too loud. And the guy had his daughters there, which, I mean, it's his place. So if I had a place and daughters, you know, I'd probably have it there. And his wife, and oh my God, his wife. So, I mean, I'm coming in, and I get this feeling about this wife, so I want to be friends with her. So I shoot the shit, and we chat it up, and blah, blah, blah. And she's just coming into these games while we're playing, and just nagging him, and so she pulls him away, and they'll be gone for 30 minutes, and so we're just like, but I'm around because I have attempted in this time span to make a couple different D&D groups, and it just falls apart. I get 2-1 people, and that turns out to be 1 or 0 people, and it's especially with how hard it is sometimes to reach out to people right now, like physically. So I'm sticking around just because I really want to role play, and this character I made was basically a commentary on everything that I had learned before. His name was Comrade Conrad, and they called him a racist. That was just what they called him. And you know what? I guess he was, but once again, it was more like for example, okay, this one player, he just went through he went through characters very quickly. I was going to try to come up with some clever thing, some analogy or whatever the one's called, and he just hated me in every single one of them, and it just seemed like all that he would do is just like figure out what this one character, like what the character could do that one trick pony, and then move on to the next. And I guess I had contempt for him just because there was very little there, and a lot of the game was just me having an idea, them being spiteful at me, so them doing the opposite thing, me being spiteful at them for doing that. And I ended up bringing my friend, my neighbor, and so he was kind of the one balancing factor there. But it got to this point where so there's I basically just made fun of a player every time they slighted me, and I was doing my best not to slight them, but they would come up and slight me, and I couldn't let it go. I couldn't just be the bigger guy. I felt like, I don't know, and maybe I was a little bit spiteful because they were just, once again, the wife would pull the DM away for 30 minutes, and then on top of that, there would be 30, 40 minutes of them reminiscing about other games in the game. And don't do that. I learned here what not to do, okay? The lesson here, and I know I was speaking very negatively, maybe not very fun to listen to, but the lesson here is the show must go on. There's nothing. Once you're dungeoning and dragoning, if anything comes up, okay, these people, these grown adults that have given you their time, that have all agreed to like meet up and spend their resources, whatever it is, gas, internet, pixels, shooting through the super webs, whatever it is, okay? They all agreed. And if you're going, as the DM, to be throwing a wrench in the works, just don't. Figure out whatever you can. If you have to, delegate. Sometimes, well, anyways, and so there's this thing just going back and forth, and it got to a point where it was bad, and then I thought it got okay, and then it got worse, and I think it was mainly just because we didn't really have an overarching kind of like, I mean, we had an overarching theme. The theme for the campaign was cool. We were part of an order. I felt as if I was a part of an order. It was an order of knights, even though no one would wear armor. That's just the quirkiness of DnD more than anything else. But I guess I just became disillusioned with everything when my character could not become invested in the world. There was no payoff. In fact, it was very much like, don't go there. And I mean, there was this Three Stooges episode, and don't do this. I learned not to do this. It wasn't fun. It wasn't cool. So basically, we would like, the extent of playing for 4 hours would be like the amount of things that would get done would be like, you would get through a portion of the forest. You wouldn't know how far you got exactly. There was a beautifully detailed overall world map that really, like, I think is the standard when it comes to being there face to face, because it's great. It's laminated. It's like this big. Yeah, it's like as big as whatever this thing could see. Like, yeah, out here, that big. So fantastic. But as far as like actual visuals, Jesus, it was a nightmare. It was a nightmare to know exactly what went on. There was this time when, like, I don't know, there was a big thing and it had these minions, and so I thought I was attacking the big thing. There was like a battle line with us and them, and so whatever I was attacking, I hit and I killed it. Like, I just like coup de grace it with my barbarity, and it wasn't the thing. Like, we all asked, like, is that it? Did I kill it? And he was like, yeah, well, you killed it. And we were like, whoa! And he's like, and then it does this. And we're like, what? He's like, oh no, you thought you killed that? You killed the other. And it was just like this, like, I don't know what I do. So it was really ambiguous as to what was going here or there. As a DM, I could see that there was definitely some value there, because you have these episodes that can essentially go on indefinitely, and that's fine. This is a fine model that can go on indefinitely, but there was no chemistry. There was no chemistry between the players, because there essentially wasn't a common foe to take us apart, like to pit us. I was the foe. there was nothing there more interesting or worse than me. Okay. And I had fun little things. I called them fairy tale creatures and this and that. And anyways, the Three Stooges episode, just I realized I'll never. We're going down this this river, and we were on a raft, and it was made by the army that we were fighting in, and the rope came apart. So some of us tried to tie it together, and while that happened, the rudder flew off, and so we're trying to steer it around. And while it does that, it hits a rock, and so now we're split in two, and we try to put it together, and someone gets snagged on a tree, and it wasn't a river rafting kind of like extravaganza sort of escalation. It didn't have that energy of that god awful scene from The Hobbit, whatever that one that was when they're going down and everything just wacky. I mean, that would have been better. We would have been going through and killing and having a merry old time. That would have been better. But it was like the Three Stooges. Every time we fix something, I'm holding the beam here to fix the thing, and whack! I hit someone into the water. And so, anyways, whatever. That was 4 hours. That was 4 hours. That was an entire fucking game. Okay. Whatever. The next game, I'm the only one my character is the only one that seems to realize this. To realize, like, A, how much it sucked, and B, like, why? Like, what led to this? And so that basically, without an overarching like quest, my character invested in the quest, and he wanted to figure out who made the thing. And so, I mean, it was made very clear by the DM that if you want something, just let him know. And this applied more or less to items. And I made it very clear that I wanted to figure out who made that raft so that we could either kill him or just give some tips and tricks about how you what might be able to keep together from first-hand experience. And it went nowhere. Like, I basically, through breaking off from the part, because we get to an area, a city or something, and I would just break off and go find someone to talk to about it, some engineer or something, and it was unattainable. He just didn't want to deal with it. He didn't want this sort of meta understanding taking place, and they kind of just wander around. And so eventually, I was asked to leave, and that was for the best. Even though it wasn't done well at all, no one ever talked to me. It was all smoke and mirrors behind my back. The guy that had a problem with me never told me he had a problem with me. There was no reconciliation. It was for the best, but it did tell me something horrifying. That it would be a while until I found another group, and so I was on social media, and I was role playing online, like not like a role playing game, but there's certain groups, and I made a group, and we all role played there, and so I made a friend, and I saw the friend was into DnD, and it was on again. It was on again, and I knew who was going to DM. I knew who was. I was going to be the DM, and so I used basically all those that campaign Gravity's 3, or I am rather, that I'd done like 3 or 4 times and only finished once. Every playthrough, everything they did, I reimagined it, and so I was ready to restart it. But this time, things were different. You couldn't meet up. Like before, I did it somewhat online, somewhat in person, or all in person. Couldn't do either now. Now it was all online, and so you got to adapt. I was given a program or access to something through something else, and so I'm taking advantage of that. And this isn't enough. This right here isn't enough to tell enough of a story. I'm doing it right now because I'm lazy. but to actually like facilitate a game of Dungeons and Dragons, you need so much more. You need visuals, and so I got on Microsoft Paint, and I just got I got carried away, and so the visuals after the first okay, so after the first I had like I have like an overall world map, and then I have an area map. Okay, but the area map is like it could be hundreds of kilometers across or miles or whatever, kilometers, miles, but it could be that big. Okay, and so um, the first game we play, you know, the player came to me. We had like three players, and they came to me and they're like, look, it was kind of hard to see what's going on the smaller perspective. So I included just a grid, and so we did just things with grids. And so with this the web hosting thing we were using, I have a little pin, and so I can draw. Okay, you're here in the grid, and you're moving there, and this and that, and it was great, but it wasn't very intuitive. It wasn't much to look at. It frankly looked horrible. It really looked awful. If you want to look at Dungeons and Dragons episode 2, we did episode 1, but we didn't think about recording it. So Dungeons and Dragons versus D&D episode 2, you can check it out. And it was really clunky. The painting wasn't really that great, and I was, I want this music centric campaign. I think music is so important. I love Perturbator or whatever he's called, and I want that like kind of thing. But music did not work out at all. Music not great because there's different levels. The program I'm using is kind of dumb because I can't change. If I could, I would lower my voice significantly, and then I would raise a couple other people's. And then we've got foreigners too playing that have accents, and it's incredible that they speak my language. If I tried to speak their language, I would just give up. In fact, I'm not even going to try. And so they have not only the ability to speak the English language, but they know it so much, so in depth, that they can think it abstractly and flow and like actually contribute. And so I'm forever grateful for them. So the music got ixnayed. And so I think the most experimental thing I did, and this I wouldn't call it a failure, I wouldn't call it a success either. And I basically did a Warhammer battle. It was a Warhammer battle that just went in the Dungeons and Dragons initiative step. And so the characters each had their initiative, and I set up a table behind me with the battlefield, and we kind of went step by step by step. And I got like a little no. I was just setting my camera on things. Actually, I was just leaning my phone camera on things. So I had the webcam, and then I had my phone cam, and that was super clunky. They were super bored about it, but I learned a lot. I learned that the actual physical models are useful, but not in terms of for like 3 or 4 hours, because I would be moving the NPC. There'd be a chunk of 15 minutes where it'd just be the NPCs moving, and don't get me wrong, you can do that and have it be perfectly natural. In a lot of settings, I think it just looks so much better though than what I was doing with the angles, and I would be setting things up. It was just super clunky, and so I'm gonna try to get an Elmo, an overhead thing, and I just get tiles so I can actually have a dungeon, like an actual dungeon crawl. I have models for every one of my characters. I have an immense man-child collection of Warhammer stuff. I'm talking about I don't know how many armies I have. They're pretty extensive, and so I have the ability to make scenery, and so I really want to use these things here, but I have to do it on a more limited scale. I let's switch to Cam 2, that kind of thing, and not get too technical, because the more technical things you have, the more technical problems you have, and so there's balance there. I think I'm on the right way, and so really I guess the whole point of listening to me now is what I would recommend really that you do for online. And I know there's Beyond Dungeons and Dragons. I know there's great programs out there. they just work so much like Microsoft Excel. Though I don't know. Um, but what I do and what I don't know, it's a lot of fun, and maybe you can find something like this. Is I have a Microsoft Paint page, and so I have like let's just say they're going to go to this area. I have an area map right there, and so I'm gonna take a grid and with Microsoft Paint, I'm going to like make walls or this or that, or I'll just download a D&D map online and edit that. That's also doable. It depends how ground up I want to do it. And so I'll do that. And basically, I want to have everything on one document. Like, so if the party's going to go 2 or 3 different places, or I need to be able to have the overall map view, I need to be able to have the map for each of those places, and I've got pictures for the areas. I've got all sorts of things all strung together. I've got little descriptions. I've basically got the entire portion of that campaign with access, easy to use access. So I'm just scrolling left, right, up, down. Sometimes it takes me a little while to find it, scroll right up, down, but it's way better than being like, you know what it looks like, and then yeah, we're on the internet, and this is what it looks like. Like having the switch browsers and reshare and just that. So the most intuitive thing that I like doing is just having everything easy to use. So it's just a slider away, this or that, and that's what I recommend you do. Whatever players you have, you've got to give them visuals. You've got to give them even rudimentary visuals, but they've got to have access to whatever you're using, whatever you think of, whatever you decide that will change the game or develop the game or have anything to do with the game, they have to have access to. So whether it's a shared document or whatever, I'm not really good about sharing the maps that I make, but I am good about sharing the rules that I make and change. There's a lot of flavor rules that I went with this. And so, like in the past, I just had it written down on a piece of binder paper, like, oh yeah, and here's the flavor rule. But now it's online; everyone can see it if they want to see it, and it works out. It works out so much better. And so, I guess this is really for me is a tale of redemption. I thought that I was a player just too toxic to get along, and I don't know. I'm not thrilled with the overall state of D&D. I think that the stigma behind D&D players is just so well like justified. It's so justified. You can use it against me if you want to, but I'm using it against my kind right now. This idea that orcs represent a race in real life and that there's so many parallels there, so that we have to take out ability. I don't know. Maybe this reduction of no negative ability modifiers, maybe this will shake up the meta or make it so there's less tieflings and maybe people will just start playing characters. But I don't know. There's this really like authoritarian sense of like control, this sense of like everything's got to be right. I mean, my barbarian was criticized for being racist, but that's because he was a barbarian surrounded by orcs and other fairy tale creatures and goblins and things like that. I mean, do you imagine that it is one harmonious society? Like in Dungeons and Dragons, wherever you go, it's just everyone just gets along, or do you think that people have had experiences with those other races? I mean, I know I get it. The Dungeons and Dragons is essentially there. It's fantasy. It's there to help us escape all the trappings of reality. So if you wanted to say, you know what, I want it to be like that, that's cool. I get it. My interpretation is a little different. I look at New York. I look at how you got Chinatown. You got all these little areas where these people with similar customs are going to tend to gravitate towards. And maybe they're going to draw generalizations about the people across the street, how funny their food smells, how funny their clothes are, or how funny their language is. I think this is a pretty typical thing to do. I think it's very organic. and this multicultural society of Dungeons and Dragons where everyone is just, I don't know. I think, but that could itself be a realization of other people's fantasies that I'm not in tune with, and so it's a game for everyone. But it seems like there's just a lack of initiative from these players, and so what I would encourage you to do if you're getting into the game, I can't save you if you've been playing this for decades, which many people have. But if you're getting the game and it seems overwhelming, fold up your player sheet, hold your D20 in your hand, twiddle it around, and just listen. Just listen to everything that's going on. Find opportunities and go after them. Do not wait for cues from the other players because sometimes they'll be there, but sometimes they won't be. And just really interact with the story. You are given an option to go off the rails. Now, where the rails are and how far you can go off them, it changes. But this is not a video game. It's so much more. The possibilities are really endless. And I need to tell you that it's good that you're playing because sometimes it's great to have non-players there. It beefs up the party some extent. But I mean, if you're a non-player, think about this. Is it maybe because there's so many players there? Is it maybe because everyone else is taking the spotlight? I know this is contradictory to what I said earlier, but um, step up. Step up. If you've got a funny idea, do it. If you have a dumb idea, do it. If you have a dumb question, ask it. Because even though it seems like everyone knows what's going on, they don't. They don't, okay? My players they don't really know what's going on all the time, but that could be due to the fact that we're constantly switching players out. And so we could have, a completely different set of players. Well, okay, each week, or sorry, each session, we could have a different set of players there completely. We have a base around like 6 to 8, I think, and so it's a lot of new possibility. But ask yourself if you're a non-player, why? Why? Like what's going on? What ask yourself what is going on, and if I can build in on this, or how I fit in on this. And a lot of times it can come down just to roles, like maybe the fighter has to move the battering ram, so you cover him. You cover the walls because you're an archer, or I don't know, something. Just don't wait for player cues, but listen to them. And getting to me being contradictory, I do believe in some amount of authoritarianism on the DM's behalf. I think that it's very wise to get things back on track because the players will push your buttons. They'll test you, and they will not act. They will never act according to the grand scheme of things, and that's fine. That's fine. But there is, I don't know. I believe that there's room for 1% of railroading. However, the lamest thing DMs do, and most DMs do it, I do it sometimes, I try not to do it all the time, is give the players a babysitter. This is bad for so many reasons. See, when you give yourself a self-insert, when you make yourself a self-insert character who's more or less telling the party what to do and what their goals are, and you're breaking the game. You're churning it instead of this massive sandbox of possibility. Now they're just these little linear hoops, these little jumps. It's not fun, and I was talking earlier about a lack of direction from the players. eventually you just gotta let them figure it out. I mean, give them hints, but it's not rewarding at all when your hand is held. And when they kill that guy or they get rid of him and they're just replaced with another one, it feels hopeless. And here's why: because what can they do? Okay, you see, the enemy NPCs, they're created with a fatal flaw, which is the fact that most characters have probably killed the majority of enemy NPCs they've ever seen. Now, I'm sure this could be easily undone by the fact, one time I saw a horde of 90,000 orcs. I didn't fight them, and that compares with the 9,000 orcs that I did kill. Okay, but regardless, the NPCs have that flaw where they're just begging to die. Like they almost have, like the enemy NPCs almost have just an expiration date of about 5 to 45 minutes hovering above their head, depending upon which one they are. And that's great because it gives them this understanding between player and DM about, how it's going to end for the NPC, the enemy NPC. But when you make these friendly, godlike NPCs, it's hard to know the extent of what they can do, and they just come out as enforcers. You just end up pushing the DM too far, and I mean, I'm telling you that it's important to get things on track, but just having this Deus Ex Machina sort of character that just can just snap things back. I don't know. It's not intuitive, and more often than not, it's a power trip. It's if you see DMs that do this, I guarantee you they're doing it for the power. Um, and so just give the players the chance to figure it out, I think. And I guess that's really where I am right now. I'm having a great time. Oh, I think for me, the thing that I'm juggling right now is giving a quality experience to more than 3 players. 3 players I can get. It's almost like I don't know. It's almost like rotating hot plates. I don't even know what that means by the way I say it, but it's just like you got them on a rotation. You set 1 or 2 on the back burner. You get 2 on the spotlight, vice versa, and it's this thing. But with 5 people, and a lot of my scenarios are really niche. Like I have a tech priest, and I don't know why, but he asks the right questions, and I give him the answers, and so suddenly this very abstract, very stylized thing becomes very technical. I switch to this lingo, and so I'm giving him all this awesome insight, but I lost a player. I lost a player that completely read what I wanted to do with the campaign. Everything I wanted to do, like when I whispered little hints out, as soon as it left my mouth, he would just explain everything. And this is the guy's first game, and so it was great, but I completely alienated him because I got way too technical for way too long. And so giving attention to every single player, I think, is so important because it's so easy to just give the spotlight and everything great to that player that's actually giving the party direction, even if it's bad direction. Um, so you've got to give them each an equal amount, or maybe not equal amount, but the right amount, I guess, of attention. And that's really what I'm struggling with, is figuring out just how to provide that constantly. Right now, my players have spent 20 sessions, 24 sessions, 21 sessions, and each session's about 3 hours long, and so that's about like 60 hours of campaign I think we played, and I feel like there's another at least 20 hours of campaign to be told here. But I don't know how much quality campaign I can provide here. They've gone through what they've gone through. The other players have gone through so many times that I know it by the back of my hand, and so this kind of meta understanding synthesized. But they're going beyond the mountains, and it's really just an endless kind of a ways. And it'll be interesting to see if I can still reinvent myself. And I guess then now I'm going to talk about Bloomsdale. This is going to be the wrap. So when we played 20 hours this campaign, half of that was in one city. In one city, okay? and I'm not sure how I feel about this. Um, and this, Gloomsdale gets down to the hammer seeing everything like a nail. Now, I've told you this before, that most players' interactions with NPCs usually end up with the NPCs, the enemy NPCs dead or usually worse. And it conditions the players to become killing machines, just nonstop killing machines whenever the opportunity presents itself, and then it becomes preemptive, and so they find opportunities to kill. And this is great, but you see, I don't believe in a dungeon where there's just a treasure chest in the middle of the room that's guarded by two bugbears. What are the bugbears doing inside a dungeon? What are they eating? Who's tending them? You know what? Why is the chest there? How did the chest get there? Why did no one else take the chest? You know, it's you can make these dungeons that are kind of like shoot 'em up, loot 'em up. You know, kill the bad guys, get past the traps, win the prize. Kind of like Indiana Jones, I guess. I mean, if you think about it, it's just the amount of infrastructure that goes with the Indiana Jones traps. It's really just preposterous, and it makes no sense. Or you can have a living, breathing thing with reality, where there's reactions, there's reasons, there's repercussions, and so me building this second one, this breathing sort of one with his repercussions, this world with his repercussions. It's so disappointing when the players just wreck everything. They just wreck every. This is my soapbox of it, and Gloomsdale is an example there, and I think it came down really. You know, in World War II, the Germans said you cannot deal with the like. There's no way to predict what the Americans will do because the Americans don't even know what they'll do. They'll just and when the Americans don't know what to do, they'll just fight. And so I don't know. I've got a lot of Americans with me, and that's basically. And here's why. So I have this cast right of about 6 to 8 players, with about 3 to 4 of them, sometimes 3 to 5 of them showing up. Having 6 to 8 of them show up on a game, I did not do well. I think that it was overwhelming for me being able to give everyone that attention. Um, Having them switch through constantly, like, and having one player miss an episode means they lost context. Now, I would do recaps for them, but it's not the same. It's not hearing someone quickly explain the context for what's going on is not the same as living through it. And so they were kind of just in this for 10 sessions, three, 2.5 to 3 hours long each session. They would kind of just be trying to put the pieces back together and figure it out. And so it got to this point where they ended up, so they made a pact with one of the factions there, and this happened really quickly on. And they even said, like, oh my God, why, we stepped right in the city and we're already meeting faction leaders and this and that. And so they made a pact, and I wanted them to write it down, and somebody did. So I thought somebody did. And they told me that they did because they told me since nobody else wanted to see the pact written down, that they added an extra clause. And I was like, you know what, that's great, because I think that's a great penalty for it. But that player didn't even write that down. And so when it came time for that clause to like be useful, I reminded him, like, I try not to just like be like, oh, remember that thing, and then have them do that. I try to jog their memory. I put it out there for them to pick up. If they don't pick it up, I just let it float away. And so, yeah, he didn't write it down. He didn't remember. Mind you, this was like 9 game hours later. So I don't blame him, but I'm just describing what happened here. I think that I just made the city too big. I should have made it a little more cut and dry. Maybe, I don't know. I think they had fun. I just didn't have as much fun as I might have had, and that I know that's kind of a drag for half the campaign, right? But it's mainly because I was tortured because they just forgot the pact, just forgot it, and they were told There was only one place they shouldn't go, and maybe that maybe that's why they went there actually. But they went there and they killed the city. Then they're upset about killing the city, so they fixed it. So they killed it again, and this wasn't like, oh, we killed the city in a different way in the process of fixing it. At least that Three Stooges would have given them some clemency in terms of their intention. But no, they just killed it like 3 times, and I voiced my dismay by just having that faction leader that they basically just betrayed out of negligence kill herself just because there was like it was so difficult for me to keep things playable and living and still get sacked over and over again. And so I don't know, maybe there is a charm in just having the Indiana Jones dungeon where everything's just so arcadey. I don't know. Um, and you know what the funny thing is? The funniest thing is, and this is what I can't wrap my mind around, is this campaign is easily, this the amount of playtime we put in eclipses the other campaigns by a magnitude of 2 to 3. But they're all just going in tangents of the main story. It's not like even like side quests that they're getting into. They're spreading out the story, and I guess that's really the good takeaway from this is it's growing organically. Believe it or not, it's growing organically. It's just I'm getting to this point now. Like they saved this village or whatever. They made a village, and the village was aligned to them. And now that they're back there, it's their village, and they're wrecking it. And I mean, they've made basically a god, and now they hate it, even though it's what they wanted. It just has a mean voice. I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of psychology here. The cool thing is I'm learning and I'm growing, and that's really what I guess. At the end of it, if you don't take any of my weird tangents into being just, try to improvise, try to be flexible, try to meet your players halfway, and see what kind of magic's going to happen.